Thank you so much, Whitman. It was a great presentation. You also managed to come from your university, Duquesne.
Yeah.
There. So now we have Phil. Zapkin is a very experienced presenter. I think in the last seat. Yeah, I think so. He's going to present on rebuilding Barbie, the ethics of modern art after Troy. He's writing his dissertation right now, and he's working on Greek dramas and their Shakespeare and their adaptations in the modern time. He's a great scholar in drama and its adaptation, everything. So now let's welcome Phil Zapkin.
So, like Harrington, I somewhat chose this title because it was fun, but the fun is now gone from it. Because I was going for sort of evoking the Adorno quote about the impossibility of poetry after Auschwitz, but I don't actually bring that up in the paper, so now it's just rebuilding Barbie, the ethics of modern art after Troy. And this actually, this paper will be sort of going into my dissertation, so any feedback, constructive criticism, and so on is appreciated. Barbie is an easy target for Marxist feminist criticism. She creates an unrealistic body image, her boobs are too big, and her waist is too small, to say nothing of not having knee or elbow joints. She's a material girl. She needs a Malibu beach house and a convertible. And of course, as one of the most popularly produced toys of the past 60+ years, Barbie literally embodies the commodity. But in Christine Evans's 2009 play Trojan Barbie, the iconic doll becomes a symbol of resistance against capitalism and imperialism. Harrington will be a big fan of this idea.
I'm already excited. I'm going to buy Barbie.
The commodified and then broken bodies of dolls stand in for the broken bodies of Trojans and the enslaved bodies of the surviving Trojan women in Evans's modernized adaptation of Euripides' Trojan Women. The way dolls are treated in the play exposes the ethical stakes for how we respond to the twin violences of imperialist war and neoliberal commodification of the human, proposing healing and aesthetics as antidotes to dehumanization. This presentation examines two characters and their relationships with the broken dolls that make up so much of the play's mise-en-scène. I focus principally on Lade, the English tourist and expert on doll repair, who is kidnapped and imprisoned in a camp with Hecuba and the Trojan women, and on Polly X, a Trojan princess and aficionado of modern art. The way these two characters treat the broken dolls points us as readers or viewers toward an ethical response to war or exploitation. However, before I begin my analysis, I should explain one major way that Evans's Trojan Barbie diverges from Euripides' Trojan Women, because this divergence speaks particularly to the postmodern and to the global war on terror, or more specifically to the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan. The most significant difference in the adaptation is that Evans collapses time upon itself, bringing the Trojan War of the Greek heroic age into the modern world through a postmodern layering of time, and by evoking specific connections to the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts. Lotte is a modern Londoner taking a holiday to Troy, while Hecuba, Polly X, and the other Trojan women are simultaneously the women of Euripides' play, set during the age of Greek mythology, and the prisoner refugees of modern military conflicts. Trojan Barbie speaks directly to this layering of history into the present. Lotte, in planning her vacation to the modern Troy, reads a brochure which informs her that the city has been razed and rebuilt 9 times, each time resurrecting itself over the buried bones of its previous lives and deaths. There is a kind of horrific inevitability of Troy, the city that is utterly destroyed and its inhabitants scattered to live their lives, to live as slaves of their emperors. Even Micah, the official spokesperson of the occupying Hellenic army, acknowledges, somehow you always end up in Troy. I think this sense of inevitability results from 2 techniques. the reenactment of the Trojan War in Euripides' play via Evans's adaptation, and the seeming permanence of destructive military conflicts. Now, many modern military conflicts, particularly in the context of the War on Terror, are paradoxically regarded as having beneficial humanitarian implications. This is a departure, of course, from the Greek myths of the Trojan War, which was decidedly not imagined to be for the benefit of Troy. Instead, under the cover of humanitarian projects and rhetorics of freedom, global North nations engineer what Naomi Klein calls disaster capitalism, utilizing a catastrophe, either natural or man-made, as a pretext for privatizing and stripping resources and industry from weaker economies. Military missions go abroad with rhetorics of economic development based on an ideology of creative destruction. And so parenthetically, creative destruction, I think, can best be understood through the cliche, you can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs. In a Freudian slip that reveals the principles of violently imposed humanitarianism, Micah announces, "We regret any casualties and the loss of innocent life. Humanitarian priorities are high on our list. I ask for your patience with the monumental changes we are installing. Rome wasn't burned in a day, built. Rome wasn't built in a day." The slippage between burning and building reveals the fact that, in the current state of military affairs, the two processes are often one and the same. But the very form of adaptation as a type of reenactment lends itself further to this sense of inevitable return. In a concise definition, Linda Hutchin claims that adaptation is repetition, but repetition without replication. What Hutchin means by this is that adaptation, an adaptation, also called a hypertext, takes a source text and reenacts it, or reperforms it, but makes critical changes to distance the new work from the adapted text, also called the hypotext. These changes may intend homage or critique, but in order to be an adaptation, the new work repeats a hypotext. This is the key idea here. In her book, Performing Remains, Rebecca Schneider argues for the meaning-making potential of reenactment, looking at how reperforming an event preserves and adds to the store of knowledge about that history. And in a sentence that could have been written directly about the postmodern temporal layering in Trojan Barbie, Schneider describes the queasy action of reenactment. She writes, "Touching time against itself by bringing time again and again out of joint into theatrical, even anamorphic relief, presents the real, the actual, the raw, and the true as precisely the zigzagging, diagonal, and crookedly imprecise returns of time." In other words, through the performative repetition of history or historical events, we collapse the distance between the present and the past, exposing the limitations of linear teleology and opening up possibilities for new pasts as well as new presents and futures. And it is to this possibility for a new future that Christine Evans turns in Trojan Barbie, presenting means of relating to one another and the world around us contra the dehumanization of late capitalist commodification and imperialist warfare. This is where I return to the dolls that are such a symbolic part of the play. Throughout the play, we're reminded that the broken bodies of the dolls on stage stand in for the broken human bodies of the Trojan War dead. In scene 2, Hecuba dreams of searching among the casualties, while Lottie simultaneously, but also centuries apart, searches through the spare doll parts in her repair shop. Hecuba begins the sentence, "This time there aren't even bodies, just limbs hopelessly mixed up, an old man's ear, a girl's left hand." And Lotta finishes the line with her, "Hair, heads, legs, fingers." The Trojan dead become identityless body parts, just like the doll parts in Lotta's London shop. Then, near the play's end, in scene 14, Hecuba and Lotte again conflate the dolls with corpses, this time with the very specific body of Astheniax, Hecuba's grandson murdered by the occupying Greek army. So he could not grow up to avenge Troy. Astheniax is played by a doll on stage and in Lotte's reality, but in Hecuba and the Trojan women's reality, he was a living child. So we've got this sort of weird disconnect where we as viewers of the theatrical experience say, yes, that is a doll, but for Hecuba and the other women in the camp, he's experienced as a living child, or dead child. As Hecuba grieves, Lotte sets to work repairing the doll, which has been executed by having its skull crushed with a tank. The way Lotte talks about this doll blurs the seemingly stable lines between the inanimate porcelain body and the dead flesh of a human child. Her repair work tries to bring Hecuba and the women consolation. As Lotte says, at least his mom is going to recognize him now. That's something. And the women work together in a tableau, which the stage directions describe as a moment of ritual, women working together as they have done for thousands of years. So again, we have this component of reenactment here. This shared project of healing, of rebuilding, embodied in repairing the dolls, presents one of the play's alternatives to imperialist violence, one method of protest against destruction. Through the communality of this healing process, and through the very act of repairing rather than destroying, the women demonstrate the limits of an imperialist politics. Although the women, as prisoners of war in a refugee camp, are denied their fundamental humanity, existing perhaps in a condition of bare life, as Giorgio Agamben might have it, through the productive efforts of the doll repair, these women demonstrate that they actually possess the humanity otherwise denied to them. By enacting their humanity, they give the lie to imperialist notions of national or ethnic superiority and inferiority, which historically undergird colonialism and imperial conquest. Ideologies that literally strip the Trojans of their humanity to replace them with dolls. The other means of resistance to imperialism and dehumanization in Trojan Barbie gives us, I'm stuck an extra word in there. The other means of resistance to imperialism and dehumanization that Trojan Barbie gives us is the aesthetic, a strand performed by Hecuba's daughter, Princess Polly X. After seeing a display of modern sculpture, Polly X decides to build a modern art of the camp, constructed of the debris from the Trojan camp, which consists mostly of broken Barbies and beer bottle caps left by soldiers. She envisions a project that she will title Trojan Barbie, consisting of a giant pink cardboard heart covered in bits of broken dolls. Polly X envisions this artwork as a catalyst for resistance against the Greek occupation, imagining that she and her sister will lead an uprising after the statue is constructed. As she says, "When it's done, me and Cassandra will rain down revenge on our enemies. We'll smash them like dolls," which is probably something I need to talk more about. We should not ignore the symbolic dimension of Polly X's choice of medium. The decision to use broken Barbies as the decorations for the cardboard heart is linked to the continuing identification through the play of dolls and the bodies of the Trojan dead. In other words, we might say that Polly X's art consists of the corpses created by militaristic imperialism recontextualized as a protest against the occupation. Although not necessarily morbid, the role of usually living bodies and the display of bodies is fundamental to theater, and performance is a major avenue for protest against imperialist occupation. Mara Wickstrom, in her book Performance in the Blockades of Neoliberalism, studies how Palestinians imprisoned in camps by the Israeli government and Irish travelers legally forced into sedentary lives use theater to protest and reappropriate space, movement, freedom, and equality. Building from the ideas of Elaine Badiou, Wickstrom writes that through resistance to their forced existence in the camps, Palestinians join an army indexed to the possible, in a new present in which equality, which carries liberation and return, is. Children on stage and watching the stage may in this context be thought of as joining a body, a subjectivating body in a new present. On stage, equality is. In other words, through the aesthetics of theater, Palestinians, and particularly the children's theater that Wickstrom writes about, can perform a space of equality, liberation, and national return, and through these performances begin to reshape the terrain of the sensible. Like the Trojan women, proving their humanity by enacting the human, Palestinians or Trojans like Poly X, begin to enact their liberation by performing it. Poly X's modern art is the artwork of her people's destruction, and through the creation of the aesthetic piece, Poly X immortalizes the loss, allowing the Trojans to live forever through the power of art. Unfortunately, to be true to this refugee art, Poly X must herself become part of the sculpture, part of the artwork of destruction. In the powerful final scene of Trojan Barbie, Poly X stands framed by the heart covered in broken dolls, and in a stylized ritual, two soldiers pull a red ribbon tight around her throat, symbolizing Poly X's throat being sacrificially cut. Her body remains framed by the heart, her own being the final body needed to complete the masterpiece, while on another portion of the stage, Lotte fixes dolls in her shop back in England. We get, at this last moment, both forms of resistance to imperialist violence and dehumanizing late capitalism, the arts and rebuilding. I think we can find a message of hope at the end of Trojan Barbie, although the situation remains terrible for the Trojan women still in the camp, and for Hecuba, who seems to claw her way through history to show up as a madwoman in Lotte's London doll shop. Through the aesthetic and communal efforts to rebuild, we can enact a new paradigm, replacing the destruction inherent in imperialism and late capitalism with a new social mode centered on communality and mutual assistance. To recognize the dolls as human, as the play encourages us to do, is to recognize our own brokenness and the need for healing and beauty as sites of resistance. What I propose is this, that through the rejection of violences and the performance of art and of healing, it becomes possible to undermine the hegemonic forces that shape global politics. We too can prove that we are human by enacting our humanity. Thank you.